Today, we're going to dive into one of the most unique and, honestly, one of the most controversial laws in all of India. It's called Section 6A of the Citizenship Act. At its heart, it asks a really fundamental question. Can the rules for who gets to be a citizen be different for just one single state? This is the story of Assam's very own citizenship test. And that brings us right to the core of this whole thing, a constitutional puzzle that's been debated for decades. In a nation that's supposed to be governed by one constitution for everyone, is it even possible for a single state to have its own totally separate rules for who is and who isn't a citizen? It's a question that pits this fundamental idea of equality against a very unique and very troubled history. To really get why this law even exists, we have to go back in time. Because this story, it doesn't start in a quiet courtroom. No, it begins with a massive historical crisis that completely gripped the state of Assam and created a situation that was, frankly, unlike anywhere else in the country. So, picture this. It all kicks off in 1971. The Bangladesh Liberation War sparks this huge wave of people migrating into the neighboring state of Assam. This sudden, massive influx of people leads to some deep social and political unrest. It wasn't a small thing. It led to years of protests and agitation. The whole conflict finally hit a turning point in 1985 when the government signed what's known as the Assam Accord, a historic peace deal that was meant to find a lasting solution. But, a peace deal is one thing. Actually turning that piece of paper into law, that's a whole different ballgame. The government solution was to stick a special clause right into India's Citizenship Act. And that clause, Section 6A, would go on to become one of the most fiercely debated laws in the entire nation's history. So what exactly is Section 6A? Well, to put it simply, it's a special rule just for Assam. It created a completely different set of cutoff dates to figure out who among the migrants could become an Indian citizen. And here's the key part. It applies to no other state. And that's exactly why it became so controversial. The law basically set up this three-tiered system, all based on when a person showed up in Assam. So anyone who came in before January 1st, 1966 was automatically considered an Indian citizen. Simple enough. But then you have those who arrived between 1966 and March 24th, 1971. They could apply for citizenship, but there was a catch, and it was a big one. They had to register, and they'd lose their right to vote for 10 years. Finally, anyone who arrived after that March 1971 date was just classified as an illegal immigrant, which meant they could be deported. As you can probably guess, a law that creates different rules for being a citizen in one part of the country, well, it was challenged almost immediately. People filed petitions arguing that Section 6A was just fundamentally unconstitutional, and the case eventually made its way to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court of India. The petitioners' whole case really boiled down to this one powerful question. Does creating a special path to citizenship for just one state violate Article 14 of the Constitution? The fundamental right that guarantees equality for all citizens before the law? The challenge was built on a few key pillars. First, the petitioners said the law was straight-up discriminatory, a violation of the right to equality under Article 14. They also argued it was a threat to indigenous Assamese culture, which is supposed to be protected by Article 29. And they claimed the central government had failed in its duty to protect the state. On top of all that, they said the cutoff dates were just arbitrary, and that Parliament didn't even have the power to make a law like this in the first place. And so after years and years of legal battles and nationwide debate, the moment of decision finally arrived. A 5-judge constitution bench, led by the Chief Justice of India himself, was given the massive task of settling this incredibly complex and sensitive issue once and for all. And the verdict was delivered. By a really decisive 4-1 majority, the Supreme Court made its ruling. But, and this is important, it was not unanimous. So how on earth did the court justify upholding such an unusual law? Well, the core of the majority's thinking was this. The right to equality isn't absolute. The law can treat different groups of people differently as long as there's a reasonable classification. And the court decided that Assam's incredibly unique history of conflict and migration was a powerful and totally justifiable reason for a state-specific solution. The court then went through each challenge one by one. It confirmed that yes, Parliament absolutely has the power to make laws on citizenship. It said the cutoff dates weren't just picked out of a hat, they were tied to real historical events. And kind of counterintuitively, the court said the law actually protects indigenous culture by creating a system to identify later migrants. They ruled this wasn't a failure to protect the state, but a regulated way to manage a huge crisis. But remember that one dissenting judge? Their opinion is a really crucial counterpoint here. This lone dissenter argued that the law was arbitrary, mainly because it didn't have any clear deadlines for identifying migrants. They also made a super important legal point. The law unfairly put the burden of proof on the government to find illegal immigrants, instead of on individuals to prove their status. So the legal battle is over. Section 6A has been declared constitutional. But what does this actually mean for the people of Assam and for the whole country? This verdict has some very real-world consequences that go way beyond the courtroom. See, the court didn't just uphold the law and call it a day. It gave clear, firm instructions to the government. It ordered officials to get serious about enforcing deportation guidelines, to strengthen the whole legal system for identifying immigrants, and to make sure the special courts, the foreigners' tribunals, start operating much, much more efficiently. So the crucial takeaway here is this. The Supreme Court gave the law a green light, but it came with a huge condition. For this unique solution to actually be considered just, its implementation can't be delayed anymore. It has to finally be swift, and it has to be effective. And this whole verdict really leaves us with a profound question, one that goes way beyond just Assam. How should a nation, especially one as incredibly diverse as India, balance that ideal of having uniform laws that treat every single citizen the same with the messy, complex reality of unique regional histories that sometimes seem to demand equally unique solutions?